Yo, what's up guys? It's your boy Franklin here. We got ourselves a brand new video. This time I'm going to be ranking all of the Pokemon remake games that have existed in Pokemon's history. So before we get into it, please like and subscribe. That is the best way to support me for free. I'm still trying to get to 10k, unfortunately. Now, I already made a video of ranking all the Pokemon mainline series games. I might have to get that updated soon because that was years ago. I don't think there's going to be much changes because my opinions kind of remain the same outside of a couple games that I recently started playing. But we're going to focus strictly on Pokemon remakes. There is Pokemon Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, Fire Red and Leaf Green, Heart Gold Soul Silver, Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team DX, Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, and Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Now, there are specific Pokemon games you might be wondering, well, where the hell are they at? Well, Pokemon Black 2, White 2 are considered sequels. So is new Pokemon Snap. Those are technically sequels. They weren't remade. And sure, they had upscale graphics of the original games, but because the story and the way the characters are involved, they are more considered sequels. So these are the remakes that we have here. And I made a tier list based on my experience overall. I can't really grade experiences. I feel like the way I play the game and the memories that I have can be divided into perfect, good, meh, and bad. I think it's pretty simple, and that way I don't have to change the scaling or whatsoever. These games, these are pretty good scales on which I can determine how I felt about these Pokemon games. So let's get right into it. Let's start off with the bad, and unfortunately Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl are going to take that spot. Now, if you are new to the Pokemon universe in general, these were probably the first Sinnoh games you played. Now, I'm not counting Pokemon Legends Arceus because it's a completely different experience, and they were the better games too. But regardless, I think these games are bad because they didn't really add anything unique to our experience. Sure, they remade one of the most beloved generations of all time, but I feel like it misses the mark on so many levels. For example, what exactly did they add to these games that are considered unique? A place where you can capture legendary Pokemon? Well, that already exists in a lot of the games, especially in the remakes I'm about to present. What about the Underground? Sure, they revamped the Underground a little bit, and you can catch Pokemon that are not found in the overall Sinnoh world, but that idea still exists in previous Pokemon games and future Pokemon games to come. What about the Pokédge? The Pokédge, man, definitely got shafted. Pokédge is one of those things where it definitely only works with the dual screen. And yes, Pokemon on the Switch don't really benefit much from the touchscreen aspect of the Nintendo Switch. So I felt like the Pokédge was just more of a, let me block your view for a bit so you can use these apps. Unfortunately, it misses the mark there. What about the artwork? Sure, I think the artwork was okay. I feel like these remakes, however, were going to be doomed from the very beginning when people were heavily divided on the opinion that Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl should not have been made in the chibi art style. I personally believe they shouldn't have been chibi. I wasn't really affected by it. It didn't really affect my experience overall. But I feel like with the amount of expectation and the amount of hype these games were getting since the inception of third generation remakes, which we're about to hit next, they fail pretty badly. Yes, they sell pretty good, but what Pokemon games don't sell good? The sales number doesn't really dictate whether the games are good or not. I think we have seen current Pokemon games having that same problem, but here we are. I do think Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes were pretty bad. Next up, we have Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Now, oh man, I am very divided on putting these on either perfect or good, but for now, I'm going to put them at good. The reason being that these games are really good was the amount of features that were presented in these games and the benefit of being part of the 6th generation boom of Pokemon Wi-Fi battles and the GTS online. I think these games benefited heavily from those two specific events, but the fact that there are certain cities like Moss Deep and Mauville City that ended up getting major facelifts, as well as the introduction of DexNav, the introduction or the expansion, I should say, of the GTS, as well as seeing characters being remade and actually having a very bigger impact on the storyline in general, made these games very, very good. I think over time, people are going to start realizing that Pokemon Ruby and Alpha Sapphire are goated, and they are the true third generation experience. If you want to play third generation games, these games I highly recommend. I still believe they missed the mark with the Battle Frontier, but they kind of try to make up for it by giving us the Delta episode, which was a phenomenal take of what could have been Delta Emerald, which I believe should have been the sister games for remakes. They should start remaking sister games. I think, going back into Generation 4 remakes, they should have just made or remade Platinum and called it a day. That would have been perfect. But, I don't work for Game Freak, and apparently my ideas are just too OP, so there you have it. But third generation games are pretty damn good. I will put them at good for now. I think over time, they're going to age like fine wine, and I think they could... Honestly, I can see them being perfect in this perspective. I'm going to put them good for now. They do miss the mark of bringing back the Battle Liaison, which I'm not really a fan of to begin with. I do think the Battle Frontier was a huge missed opportunity. If the Battle Frontier was there, perfect games, call it a day. But I think for now, because of those two negatives or cons, these games are going to be good. But I think over time, I would not be surprised if they end up being perfect games. Hell, I still play the Alpha Sapphire to this day just because I want to get the gold trainer card, and I think it's still really good games. Up next we have is Fire Red and Leaf Green. Wow. This brings me back. It's been years, and I mean years, that I've ever, played these games ever again. But I think these are the perfect generational games. Now, they do mesh between first and third generation because there are third generation mechanics reintroduced in Fire Red and Leaf Green. But the fact that they brought those ideas from Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, they implemented in upscaled and more modern first generation Kanto games, as well as the introduction of the Sevi Islands, which was a really good post story. I think these games are perfect. Is there a reason for you to even buy red, blue, yellow, and green? Absolutely not, because these games exist. The post story, as I mentioned, phenomenal. The fact that each island, the Sevi Islands, have their own unique identity, and the tracks. Oh my god, the soundtracks of these games. It's phenomenal. And the fact you get to rebattle the Elite Four with their perfect or ultimate teams, wonderful as well. And it's just amazing what they could have done. Now, I'm kind of glad they saved the 2 region games for Heart Gold and Soul Silver later on down the road. But I think these are the perfect Pokemon games, and I am surprised that a lot of people aren't saying that these games aren't goated enough in this generation. But remember, they're the games that are kind of trapped in time. Unless you have an emulator and unless you play these games at their peak, a lot of people have missed out on a great set of Pokemon games. Hell, even the introduction of wireless Wi-Fi was a crazy thing back then. And even now, we get to see the ideas of such games, being the pioneers of truly a magnificent era in Pokemon. I do think these games right here are just chef kisses all around. Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Now, I've played these games recently. Unfortunately, I didn't get to play them at their absolute prime because of school, but they're perfect games. I think a lot of people will say these are one of the greatest Pokemon remake games of all time. And I will say, based on my recent gameplay of Pokemon Heart Gold, I agree. The 2 regions, first of all, beautiful. Upscaled graphics to match with the current quote-unquote graphics of Generation 4. Beautiful. Storyline, beautiful. The fact that you can do a lot of stuff. There's quite a bit you can do in one region, but with 2 regions, there's a lot of great things. The Battle Frontier being reintroduced into these games, perfect post-play. The fact that you can hunt roaming Pokemon, there's stationary legendary Pokemon you have to hunt specifically, and the game actually doesn't tell you where you can find these Pokemon, so they can be random counters along your journey through the Johto region and Kanto overall. And beautiful. The fact that they kept the essence of the 2 regions instead of making us play 2 games to get 2 regions. Beautiful. I think that was a really well executed idea back then. I feel like Heart Gold and Soul Silver were the beginning of the Pokemon peak era. And sure, there is an argument that could be made that, fourth generation and even third generation was the beginning of peak Pokemon. But I feel like if you're climbing up to the top of where Pokemon games are standing, you will find these games, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, at the very peak or the beginning of peak. I think if it wasn't for these games in particular, fourth generation might have suffered quite a setback, and Platinum would have been the only golden child of this generation. But we ended up getting triplets of golden childs, and I'm glad I got to play these games recently so I can have a much regarded opinion of these games, and it's just beautiful. The addition of the Pokewalker was also introduced into these games, and it was a way to interact with your Pokemon. And the fact that you're able to see the old gym leaders and the more refreshed gym leaders of this generation, outstanding. The extracurricular activities that I just mentioned, beautiful. Kurt's Pokeballs, Apricorns, beautiful. The Pokemon bug catching contest was a reminiscent of the older Pokemon games, beautiful. Stuff like that. The fact that they kept a lot of that identity in these games and paying a ode of respect to the previous generation games, which were Generation 2. Beautiful overall. I think these are probably going to be the most perfect Pokemon games as you can get. And if you haven't played these games, I highly recommend it. Alright, now we're going on to the final two. We got Rescue Team DX, which I think they're pretty good games. Pretty good games. Whoever is developing these games with Mystery Dungeon, I don't know if it's still Chunsoft or Spike. I completely forgot the name of the actual developing game company that does these. I know there's been a switch off and rebranding of the company, so forgive me if I don't recollect that information. They really got a good blueprint for future Mystery Dungeon games to go. First of all, the graphics of these games, beautiful. It still is fresh, but yet reminiscent of the previous games like Pokemon Red and Blue, which was the heavy emphasis of such games for this. The fact that you get to choose Pokemon instead of relying on a personality quiz was a pretty good life quality update, or quality of life update, as well as having the developer office allowing you to rescue people and getting a stack of rewards while being on the same mission. Pretty damn good. And you get to reap a lot of rewards because of that. I feel like the gameplay is fulfilling, and it's also like Mystery Dungeon. A lot of people love Mystery Dungeon, but let's say in the future they want to remake Explorers of Time and Darkness, Explorers of Sky, and other Mystery Dungeon games I didn't mention. This might be a good blueprint. Do I think these games are perfect? No. It's more of a nostalgia reach, similar to like all these games. I mean, nostalgia pull is a heavy factor when it comes down to the consumers of such Pokemon games. I do think these games are really good. I had fun, and the other thing too that I like to mention about Mystery Dungeon DX was it benefited a lot because of the pandemic. If you guys recall, prior to the pandemic, these games were pretty damn hot, and once the pandemic settled in, people had to stay home, and these were a good time-killing game up until the release of Animal Crossing New Horizons. I do think this game is pretty good. I will say it's gonna age okay. I don't think it's gonna age quite as well as Fire Red or Leaf Green or Heart Gold and Soul Silver. I do think these games are good. And then last but not least, we got Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. This might be controversial, but I do think these games are good. A lot of Pokemon fans will say, well, these games are meh. These games might be bad. Me personally, I think these games are good. Now, you have to understand the reasoning of why these games were created in the first place. First of all, it was to introduce Pokemon onto the Nintendo Switch. And yes, there's Pokemon Quest. If you guys remember that game, it was kind of like the Minecraft or Roblox version of Pokemon, but that wasn't really a true Pokemon experience. These games were the first test, the first step in the water of trying out Pokemon on Nintendo Switch. This was also a gateway for the casual Pokemon fans who were playing Pokemon Go. Hey, if you like Pokemon Go, you sure should try out Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. And yes, they are considered remakes, even though a lot of people will say, well, they might be remasters of Pokemon Yellow. That is a good argument, but they did remake these games and they did change quite a things. Obviously, the most controversial change they made was eliminating wild battles because they wanted to test out Pokemon Go's catching mechanics, because you're still bringing in a casual audience from a different era, from the mobile phone onto Nintendo Switch. That was the whole point of Pokemon Go. You could say it's a cash grab, sure, that's an argument. I mean, a lot of Pokemon games, if not all of them, are cash grabs because y'all are suckers. But I think these games are pretty good. And hot take, I'm not sure if it's really hot take anymore looking back at the current, Pokemon games on the Switch. These might be the best looking Pokemon games on the Switch. And it's pretty sad to say that when we have Sword and Shield and Scarlet and Violet that unfortunately just fail on so many levels. Now, I will say Pokemon Legends Arceus, there's an argument that game might look a little better for its aesthetics and the whole purpose of the game. But in terms of technicality, in terms of movement and performance, these games are pretty damn good. And of course, they introduced the EV and IVs, and that system. Battling was definitely not made for those games. They changed the way you increase Pokemon stats. But overall, I think it was a pretty good take of the Kanto games. Now, the only thing I will say is that these games probably should not have been the full $60 value, because you're not getting a true full Pokemon experience. If these games were like maybe $40 to $50 US dollars, by the way, I think these games would have been a lot better perceived. But for what it's worth and for what purposes they were making behind this game, I thought they were pretty good at what they do. Do I think they're going to make future Pokemon Let's Go games in the, along the timeline? I feel like Johto should get one, me personally. I don't think there should be any more beyond Johto. I think Johto is another one of those regions that should be touched back upon, but that's just my opinion. And there you go. There's no meh Pokemon games here because, the opinions are pretty sharp. But anyways, let me know what you guys think. It's your boy Franklin. Please like and subscribe again. Support me for free. If you guys actually agree with me, let me know why in the comment section down below. Or if you don't agree with me, we can talk about it down in the comment section below. Anyways, signing out. Hope to see you guys on the next video. Peace.